Next, we will hear from various case examples from Sydney and London. Legacy planning presentations will be made. The first speaker is from Sydney Olympic Park Authority, Ms. Susan Skuodas. Ms. Skuodas, would you like to come to the podium? Today she'll be talking about the Olympic Park Master Plan 2030 and the Sydney Olympic Park. Please. Ms. Skuodas.
Good afternoon. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Susan from Sydney Olympic Park, and I'm very happy to be here in Tokyo at this time, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the successful legacy that we are living at Sydney Olympic Park. We are now approaching our 15th anniversary since the Sydney 2000 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and a lot has changed in that time. So I'd like to give you a snapshot of what Sydney Olympic Park is like today. We are a vibrant new suburb in the heart of Sydney with residents, workers, students and many visitors. What was once a polluted and neglected area of Sydney has become an important community asset. We are Australia's premier destination for entertainment, recreation and sporting events of all shapes and sizes. We are one of Australia's largest urban parklands with important green spaces for a growing community. And we have countless picnic areas and playgrounds and over 35 kilometres of cycleways and walking paths to keep our community healthy and active. We are the home of sport at all levels, the training ground and competition arena for the community and also for our elite and professional athletes. We are a venue for business events where people come together for meetings, conferences and trade shows from around Australia and around the world. We are also a place for education where students of all ages come to discover and learn about the environment, sport and sustainability. We are a fast-growing business hub with over 200 organisations now doing business within the precinct. And we are a home for new residents who choose to live in Sydney Olympic Park because of the amazing lifestyle that it offers. Lastly, we are a showcase for best practice environmental management and urban design and planning. But Sydney Olympic Park wasn't always like this. And to get a better appreciation of what we have achieved at Sydney Olympic Park, we need to have a look at where we have come from. The park's industrial history dates back to the early 1900s with the establishment of the state meatworks and brickworks. Later, during the 1930s and 40s, chemical factories arrived in the precinct, producing a range of pesticides, oils, paints and resins. By the 1980s, these industries stopped their operations. The land in this area became very degraded and the waterways and groundwater became very polluted. But the main destroyer in the area was uncontrolled landfilling, when millions of cubic metres of household, commercial and industrial waste was dumped. The area became an embarrassment to Sydney. But then in 1993, Sydney's successful bid for the 2000 Olympic Games fast-tracked the area's urban regeneration. The Olympic Coordination Authority was formed in 1995 to oversee the planning and development of facilities for the Sydney 2000 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And our challenge was to transform this problem area of Sydney into a major community asset for the long term. What followed was a massive construction program which provided new buildings and infrastructure that addressed the specialised needs of one enormous event, but it ensured that these venues could serve multiple purposes into the future. And the result was exemplary. Construction of the permanent sporting venues was completed 8 months ahead of schedule, a feat unequalled by any previous Olympic host city. And for the first time, the athletes and the officials were housed within the Olympic precinct, which is today the thriving suburb of Newington. At the time, Sydney was considered the best games ever. And by any measure, the Sydney Olympics were a huge success. More than 5.5 million people visited the games that were held at Sydney Olympic Park. But the games are much more than just a great party. And no matter how good the event, you could never have justified substantial taxpayer funding if the only benefits were an outstanding 2-week festival of sport. An independent audit of the Sydney Games reported that it cost 6.6 billion Australian dollars, with the net cost to the taxpayer of 1.7 billion. But from the community's point of view, it is the legacy of the Sydney Olympics which made the event truly worthwhile. And there are many elements to legacy, including the substantial economic benefits from the event, which were in excess of $10 billion spread across the wider community. The boost in participation in sports, especially those sports where Australia had excelled. The acquisition of new skills across many industries, including venue design, event management and volunteering. There was a greater awareness of the environment. After all, Sydney was known as the Green Games. Part of the legacy was also the enhanced reputation of Sydney as a global city and of the Australian people resulting from their successful conduct of the Games. The fact that we said that we did it and we did it well. But today, I'd like to focus on the physical legacy, the world-class venues and facilities that was left behind, and also the vibrant new community of residents, workers and students that is emerging at Sydney Olympic Park. It was a condition of hosting the Olympic Games that we build world-class facilities like the Olympic Stadium, the Aquatic Centre, the Indoor Arena and many others. There was also investment in new road, rail and ferry links, providing critical public transport infrastructure. These venues and this infrastructure was badly needed in Sydney. But what the Olympics did was give us a reason to build all of these much needed facilities in a shorter time frame. And they were all grouped together to create a purpose-built events precinct that is now Australia's home of sport and major event, and that delivers significant economic benefits for the community and the state. By any standard, these facilities are being well used by the community. And since the Games in 2000, we have staged many international events, including the Rugby World Cup in 2003, the World Masters Games in 2009, and the Asian Football Cup earlier this year. Next month, we will be hosting the World Cup of Netball, where teams and fans from 16 countries will come to our park and provide significant benefits for the community again. The Olympic Stadium, which is now known as ANZ Stadium, was always designed to be reconfigured after the Games. And this involved removing the athletic track and reducing its capacity from 110,000 to 85,000, which ensured the stadium's long-term financial success and viability. The stadium now hosts soccer, rugby union and rugby league on a rectangle pitch, and Australian rules football and cricket on an oval pitch. It has also been the venue for many live concerts, including AC/DC, U2 and the Rolling Stones. Our indoor arena has been very successful. It is now called All Phones Arena, and it stages a wide variety of events from rock concerts and sports competitions. It ranks within the top venues in the world, up there with O2 in London and also Madison Square Garden in New York. The sporting venues that were built for the Games, the Aquatic, Athletics Centre, Archery, our Indoor Sports Centre and Hockey Centre, are all struggling to keep up with demand. When building these venues, we knew beforehand that they would require ongoing public support. But we decided that the value in keeping these venues was in the community participation in sport. The venues were designed with sustainability in mind, and Russell will touch on that next, and so that the ongoing management costs would be kept very low. But the social benefit of the entire Olympic legacy experience and what these venues deliver now far outweighs the ongoing management costs. The Aquatic Centre here is a perfect example. It is a great community asset that has leisure pools and water slides. It has a health club and a gym to keep local residents and workers fit and healthy. It has Australia's largest swim school, where 4,500 students learn to swim. It is a venue where our schools within Sydney hold their swimming carnivals, and it is the state centre of excellence in aquatic sports, where our Australian athletes are now training for next year's Rio Olympics. When it comes to venues, it is important to recognise that the job doesn't stop at the Games. These facilities are continually improved and adapted to meet the changing needs of the community and, of course, to improve their financial performance. Within the precinct, we've added more venues, including a netball centre of excellence to cater for Australia's #1 female sport and an elite training centre for Australian rules football. Sport and entertainment are very much a part of life in Australia, and it is this lifestyle, coupled with the environment benefits, that draw people to live at Sydney Olympic Park. Which brings me to the second aspect of legacy I'll be talking about today. The regeneration of the Sydney Olympic Park area allowed new residential communities to develop at a time when more housing was needed in Sydney. This started in the month after the Games and continues to this day. The Athletes' Village was a staged development. The first stage of homes were released to the public 2 years before the Games started. Buyers who settled their purchase before the Games entered into a leaseback arrangement with the consortium so that the houses would be available for the athletes. And during the Games, over 15,000 athletes and officials were accommodated in the village. After the Games, the village was transformed, and today we have a residential suburb called Newington, which has 6,000 residents. There are residents also within the Sydney Olympic Park Central Precinct itself, and we have more residential towers under construction, and over the next 3 years we expect the population to grow 4 times over. Sydney Olympic Park has also emerged as an economic centre and is now the 7th largest economy in Sydney and 20th largest economy in Australia. There is a mass of workers and residents that have built a service industry, cafes and restaurants, convenience stores, banks and florists, which in turn serve the event patrons and recreation patrons that keep our venues busy. The development that has happened in the last 15 years has come from the first master plan, which we had straight after the Games. This plan identified development sites that were immediately available, but it wasn't ambitious enough. In the years that followed, a more comprehensive master plan was developed. Master Plan 2030, which guides the long-term planning for Sydney Olympic Park And this is what I wanted to show you up on screen today. Master Plan 2030 builds on the initial success of the urban renewal at Sydney Olympic Park and maximises its location right in the heart of Sydney. It also builds on the park's uniqueness as an outstanding sports, entertainment and recreation precinct. Master Plan 2030 meets the objectives that are outlined in our legislation and delivers 3 major provisos. And these are to preserve and enhance the park's community, recreation and environmental value, to make sure it remains a major event precinct so that we can host another major international event, and to ensure that it plays a role as a support platform for the development of sport at all levels. We have set targets within that master plan to enhance the number of residents and the number of workers that are in the park. This keeps our legacy venues busy and successful. While we still have a way to go realising the vision for Sydney Olympic Park, it is important to realise how far we've come. And there has been $2 billion of private and public developments approved at the park since the 2000 Olympic Games. It is encouraging that we continually receive visits from other host cities who are hosting major international events, and we have already welcomed many from Japan. Of growing importance is the legacy benefits from these events. London has built from our experience, and they adapted it, their games and their legacy to suit their own circumstances. And we're encouraged to see that this is happening in Tokyo already. We expect a successful Olympic event in 2020 and are confident that it will provide long-term benefits for the community. Thank you for the opportunity to showcase Sydney Olympic Park today. I'd just like to leave with a quote that we recently got from Dr. Thomas Bach, who is the president of the IOC, who visited Olympic Park in April this year. And he said that we should be proud of the wonderful legacy that the Sydney Games are living. And I can tell you that we are very proud of Sydney Olympic Park. What was once an industrial wasteland and an embarrassing eyesore for Sydney-siders has now become a wonderful asset and an integral part of Australia. Thank you.
Skuodas様、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Ms. Skuodas.